Welcome to the PKU Life podcast with Kevin Alexander. Today is April 9th, 2019. Well, hello and welcome to the show. Before we get into today's interview, I wanted to remind you that next month is PKU Awareness Month. If you're active on social media and connected with the PKU community there, then you know that all month long, people will be sharing information and stories about their experiences with PKU. I highly encourage you to participate if you can. Look, I know that I'm very open about talking about my experience living with PKU, and I know that many others are as well. But I also recognize that there are other people who, unfortunately, do not receive the social support they need. Living with PKU becomes a burden for them because when they speak about it, there are people in their lives who, unfortunately, make them feel more different and alone. I've spoken with many people in our community over the years, and I know this isn't isolated just to teenagers who are unfortunately encounter peer pressure on a daily basis to conform in ways that would compromise their health. But let's be real. Adults can be immature as well, and often those who are in our lives may do or say things to us that discourage us from sharing our experiences. If you're in a situation like this, make the decision that is right for you. Speak publicly or don't speak publicly. Do whatever you need to do to make sure you don't get discouraged from at least living your PKU lifestyle the right way. If you don't feel comfortable speaking out, that's perfectly fine. If you're an introvert, I completely understand. I am by nature as well. And it just happens that my life's journey brought me to a place where I now feel comfortable speaking about my experience. But if you choose not to share your story in a public way, at the very least during the month of May, get connected to others on social media. Find some people who share the same experiences as you and talk privately. Just do something for yourself during PKU Awareness Month to better your own PKU experience. For others of you who are more comfortable with sharing your stories, if you live in the United States, don't forget that we are still trying to get the Medical Nutrition Equity Act passed in Congress. I'm sure you will see a lot of people posting about it during the month of May. So no matter if you are more private and choose not to speak publicly about your experience, which again is perfectly fine and normal, don't let other people's activity on social media become its own sort of peer pressure. Or whether you are the outgoing kind of person who loves to share posts every day during the month, just remember, we are all one community with one purpose, trying to deal with PKU the best way we can and live a healthier life. Now, my guest today is Laura Hines. Laura is an adult living with PKU, a new mom, and host of the YouTube channel Thriving with PKU. In this interview, we talk about what it was like for her growing up with PKU, the challenges she faced managing her PKU diet during pregnancy, and why she wanted to start her YouTube channel. PKU community, meet Laura Hines. Well, first of all, Laura, let me just say thank you very much for being on the show today. I look forward to chatting with you.
I look forward to it too. Thank you. I love this podcast, so I'm excited to be on it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like I've said before, I'm a video guy, and doing a podcast is new territory for me, but I'm really enjoying it. So let's, we'll talk a little bit about, your YouTube channel, Thriving with PKU, which I know a lot of people know you from. But let's back up for a little bit. Anytime I talk with someone who's an adult living with PKU, I kind of like to start kind of at the beginning. Now, I understand that you don't remember your diagnosis story. Parents, I want to talk to them. They know their diagnosis story. And adults, obviously, you don't remember it. So let's just fast forward a little bit, and let's just talk a little bit first about what it was like for you as a kid growing up with PKU. First of all, where were you from? Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in SoCal, in Southern California. So a little bit lucky in the PKU scene there because there's just so many people. So I was kind of around other PKU people often. But yeah, my childhood, my mom's a nurse. So like you said, I don't remember my diagnosis, but she remembers it. And she, being a nurse, still didn't really remember what PKU was, just because it's that rare. And yeah, her and my dad just raised me to just be really in control and on top of my diet. And, as a kid, I remember like every once in a while feeling left out as far as like, food and being around friends at the lunch table and stuff like that. But I mostly was pretty good with my diet. I knew what I could and couldn't eat. My mom really tried to teach me really well and I guess you did a really good job of making me independent is like what I think is so important. But yeah, so that's kind of where it all started for me. I went to PKU events all the time. I couldn't stand them when I when I was a kid. My brother and sister both don't have PKU, and we would have to drive to downtown LA for my doctor's appointments, which is not far. It's like anywhere from 45 minutes to like maybe 3 hours, depending on traffic. So it would be like a family affair. We'd all go out there together. And yeah, I did. I mean, I did pretty well on diet. And then I got to my teen years and things got a little bit sideways. I never was like fully off diet, but started just wanted to like hang out with friends and not think about it. And started seeing some high Phe levels and got it back on track once I was sent to a PKU. It was actually a PKU maternal camp in California. And I met people there that were untreated. And I think the first time in my life, like, it made sense to me. Like, when you're a teenager, you kind of think like you're invincible. And that to me was like kind of a wake up call. Like, oh, wow, I have all these things that I want to do. I'm starting to plan out where I want to go to college and all this stuff. And just kind of saw the path I was going on was not going to be the path that I wanted it to be unless I changed something. So that's kind of like my early years with PKU.
So you mentioned, let's back up for a second. You mentioned that you have a brother and sister. I have an older brother myself. So I'm just kind of curious, in your case, was having PKU and being the only one with it in your family, was it something that, that you got extra attention for and you didn't like it, or you did like it? Or, what was it like, that dynamic of being the one person in your family who had to eat differently than everyone else?
Right. Good question. I think that I don't think I liked it. I mean, I feel like I've been always like kind of like the laid back kid out of all my siblings. And I just didn't really like the special attention. Like, I remember my mom used to tell people, oh, she's on a special diet. And I'd like get so embarrassed and be like, oh gosh, Mom, do we have to tell this to people? But I mean, now my sister is super helpful with everything. But I know they've talked, being all adults now, they've talked kind of going back and have said like, oh, it kind of felt like you did get special treatment. And, sometimes that was hard for us. And, on my perspective, I'm like, oh yeah, real hard as you eat bacon. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a really complicated, dynamic sometimes. So
it's kind of like you want to kind of playfully snap back and be like, well, I'm sorry my metabolic disorder inconveniences you. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
Obviously.
No, I mean, no hard feelings now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like, I mean, they would go to me to these PKU events. And like my brother used to say that some PKU people at these events would just stare at him as he got like a hamburger at the PKU table, or at the, the high protein table. And he'd be like, I feel so out of place. Like,
well, confession to make here. Like, this year will be, I think, 8 years that I've been on Kuvan. And like I said before, I've had a crazy huge response to it. I mean, I can eat almost normal now, just don't eat any meat, but I can eat so much. I mean, I'm at 60 grams per day,
Wow.
And so like when I first started going to PKU conferences, I'm like, I gotta eat from the other line. I feel kind of weird because everybody's like, people who know me are like, oh, what are you eating? What are you eating? And I'm like, I'm eating real bread. And I'm sorry. And I have a couple of guys, my friends that I interviewed on the podcast a couple weeks ago, Kurt, Les, and Eric. And we're sitting at the table once, and I'm just like, we're eating at Olive Garden, and everybody at the table had different ranges, and I'm like the one eating the real bread and a little bit of real pasta, and they're like, sorry, and they're like, oh, shut up.
Right, staring daggers at you, right?
Yeah, but one other thing, you kind of mentioned, like, as you got in your teenage years, that you kind of started experimenting a little bit. Not like, I kind of have a similar situation where I never really went crazy, like off diet, the way I would describe it, but I definitely was too relaxed, not counting things like I should. Of course, when I was growing up, they had told me when I became 18, I might be able to go off diet someday. So as I got older, I thought, hey, I can be a little bit more relaxed, In your case, though, did you ever feel, was it like a peer pressure thing, like people actively wanting you to eat the same things as them, or was it more just you kind of thinking, maybe it won't be too bad if I do this?
It definitely was me saying, oh, this isn't going to be too bad. I mean, and it wasn't really, I had a really hard time because I still felt like I was trying to eat, the PKU diet. Like, I remember one time, the Mexican food in Southern California is just incredible. And I remember one time going with friends, and they all got these huge plates of food, and I got a flour tortilla. and I had a super high Phe level because of it. And I remember that so well because I was like, man, I'm not going crazy here. Like I left and I wasn't even full and I'm still having high Phe levels. And my friends were I had a really like close knit group of friends that I had grown up with and was with them in high school. So I think that it was more just me just like doing that, kind of trying to stay on the diet, but also just like not caring, like genuinely not caring and not really realizing what was happening, you know? And I've said it before at different like PKU events and stuff. I really, really felt that I didn't realize like the symptoms I was having until my Phe levels got better. And then I looked back and was like, oh man, like all these things. I was in high school and, you know, was trying to figure out who you are, whatever. And just started seeing like, oh, this grumpy, like irritable teenager is not really who I am. Like I'm pretty laid back and pretty like, you know, I feel like I'm pretty kind-hearted, but I was just not, I mean, those are my high Phe levels and I didn't realize it until after the fact.
Yeah, it's a really good point because I had a similar situation when, you know, again, because I thought as I got older that maybe someday I could go off diet, I kind of fell out of touch with my clinic. You know, I was kind of like, I'm doing this thing, I'm good, you know. I was eating mostly still vegetarian diet, eating something. It was never like I ate a lot of food that I just was never supposed to eat because my tolerance is a little higher. It was more of like eating the things that I kind of could eat, but eating way too much of those, you know?
Right.
And so
that's exactly it. Yeah.
And so when I, in my mid-20s, by that point, I've been married a few years. My wife has always been very, very understanding about PKU and able to kind of help me sometimes if my levels have been off, be able to, you know, talk to me. It's like, are you okay? You had your formula, that kind of stuff. And so when I was working in TV and I was working very long hours all the time, and I would just come home just absolutely exhausted. And at this point, I was doing it without being on any formula for the most part. You know, I was just trying to do everything besides, you know, formula, thinking, oh, it's not that big of a deal anymore. And she was the one that suggested that, you know, kind of get back in touch with the clinic. And so long story short, I kind of got back in touch with the clinic. I started drinking, you know, formula like I was supposed to again. And just that, you know, without even changing my diet up dramatically, just making sure I was getting the formula that I needed, it was like a night and day difference. It was like, you know, being in that kind of the brain fog or whatever. And then suddenly you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know you could actually feel this good. You know, I didn't know I could go the entire day without coming home and just want to collapse on the bed, you know?
Right.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit. You know, you in the last, I don't know, how long have you had your YouTube channel Thriving with PKU now?
Gosh, it's been like, I want to say I'm not very good with dates. I want to say about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. That it's been around. And
tell me kind of how did you kind of start having the vision for Thriving with PKU, and what was kind of going through your head when you decided you wanted to launch it?
Yeah, so I started a few years ago, maybe about 4 years ago, traveling around to different PKU events around the country. And I just felt really like blessed that, you know, I had a company that was, you know, sending me and I got to share my story. And I definitely felt at that time that I had not a lot to offer and I was learning a lot more from the community than I felt I could offer them. I still feel like that, but I just kind of was opened up to this whole community of PKU people when I had previously just been like living in this bubble in Southern California. And so behind the YouTube channel, basically, I just started meeting all these people and just hearing how many people were struggling with getting medical foods and medical formula based on state laws or whatever, or it's way too expensive, they can't get covered, things like that. And I also started hearing about, you know, these are people that are at the events. So there's this whole other like subset of the community that probably have high Phe levels too and may not even want to leave their house. Like I get seriously like big anxiety, especially social anxiety when my levels are high. So I can only imagine like people who may not want to leave their house and even go to a PKU event. So I just, all this stuff was going on in my mind and I was like, what can I do? Like, it's not enough for me to just go on weekends. Like, I want to provide something for the community that people could access from their living room or their couch, like, where they don't have to leave. And I really wanted it to be something where even if people couldn't get medical foods, they could see that there are ways to eat lower in protein, maybe not as low as they need, but lower to bring the Phe levels down. So anyway, so that's like where my brainstorming sort of led me to. I went at the time to a PKU advocacy summit in San Francisco, and I heard that YouTube is like the #2 search engine for medical advice. And it kind of like dawned on me. I was like, that's it. Like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'll figure it out as I go. And yeah, so that's kind of how Thriving PKU was born. I pitched the idea to some friends of ours at church, and I just told them, like, hey, I can't pay you. I have no idea what this is really going to look like, but would you like to help? And they were on board and so excited. And that's how we started the channel. So it was really, really exciting at the beginning too, because I had just like thought and brainstormed so much about it and was like, I don't know why, but I was like, oh, if 50 people see the channel, like, it will make me like, I feel like that would be success for me, like 50 people. And the first day I had 50 subscribers, and I was like, wow, it just like encouraged me. I was like, wow, this is something that like, it seems like the community is enjoying. So, now it's just become my little like passion project that I just adore. So.
What are some of the things that you've kind of learned along the way, as far as, you had an idea for what you originally wanted to do, and then as you kind of started producing content, getting stuff out there, and started hearing back from people, was there anything you kind of learned along the way and kind of said, oh, I didn't even think about that, let me do this also?
Oh, yeah. So, oh man, I feel like that happens constantly. I feel like the main thing I've learned is just like how many people are willing to have any any recipes that they can add into their rotations. I don't know. I feel like I'm very much like, I find recipes and then I like go overboard on them, and I have them constantly because they work. So I felt like from the beginning that I got really good responses for recipes, and I guess I've learned so much that there's just so much out there that I have no idea about either. And I think something that I'm like looking forward to in the future is sharing like other people's recipes too, like not necessarily my recipes, because I'm like a mediocre cook in my opinion, but there's such a wealth of knowledge of all these PKU parents and all these, adults with PKU. So I feel like I just feel like I have so many answers for this question. I'm just rambling, but I feel like overall, the biggest thing I've learned is that there's just so much knowledge out there that I'm just hoping can be shared and just help people out.
Yeah, I will say, just kind of a general overview. I mean, obviously, like I've said, my diet is completely different than it used to be, and it's very different than most other people with PKU. But as a general principle, though, I personally, I love to cook. I didn't discover that I love to cook until probably about 10 years ago. Just was never something, I would always just eat junk or fast food or something, anything I could do and feel like, okay, I'm doing okay on my diet, but not thinking, I was thinking only in terms of PKU and protein, but not in general global terms about just eating good foods, that I can eat. And, I just discovered, a joy and a love for cooking. And it's something that I think that most people, I think people are just intimidated by cooking. I think that's what
absolutely.
It is. And it's,
I totally agree.
And it's definitely something that, like you ask me to bake anything, I'm like, no, I'm just going to go home and cry. I'm like, no. Right. Finding recipes that work. I'm kind of like you, like when I find something that I like, I'll do that over and over and over and over again for a while, because you know what, get busy with life, other stuff going on. And there's already, you feel overwhelmed sometimes because you're trying to balance, getting enough protein with not getting too much protein, and, making sure you don't have too many calories, but you need enough calories, and all the math that goes into that. And you're just like, I just need something that I know that I can rely on that's good, And so my wife and I, we just don't even eat out anymore. And I speak about this a lot. She actually has celiac disease and has to eat a very strict gluten-free diet. And so it's just easier for us to cook at home like 99% of the time. Yeah. And there's something about that too, that even though on one way you can look at it and it's kind of stressful and overwhelming, at the same time, if you're doing things together, it's an opportunity just to hang out with people,
Yeah.
And I kind of look at it that way, that, we always talk about how eating is such a social thing. And there's two ways to look at it. Either you can be sitting with a group of people and you can only be concerned about the fact that I'm eating something different than everybody else. And I know that feeling, obviously, myself. But there's also something just about being able to share a meal together when you take your mindset off of that I'm eating different, and just switch it to, hey, I'm eating with someone else. And to me, it helps me a little bit, I guess, try not to feel like, oh, well, I'm just eating something different than everybody else. So let's talk a little bit now about, you mentioned that you're originally from Southern California, but if I'm not mistaken, you moved a few years ago. Is that right?
Actually, yeah, it's been about 6 months. I moved out to Texas, so I'm a fresh Texan now.
I gotcha. Well, have you learned the what was it? I remember. Of course, I'm in Northwest Louisiana, and which is like right there at East Texas. And so when I worked in TV news, we would always go over to East Texas to cover news. And I remember going to a city council meeting once and hearing the Texas Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm in a different place right now. Louisiana didn't have a Pledge of Allegiance. Texas got itself a Pledge of Allegiance. I'm in different territory. Right. But so I'm just kind of curious because I'm very fortunate that Louisiana has always had very, very good coverage for formula specifically. Low protein foods, I think, is a little bit more it depends on what insurance you have, but there's a plan in place. I think that for that they're supposed to provide coverage for that. Just in general terms, Louisiana is a good place to live if you have PKU. Because of that, my industry, people think, oh, move to Los Angeles, move to New York, move to Austin, wherever. So I've never really thought about moving because I'm like, I've got good coverage. I don't want to take a chance of not, having my formula. So when you were in California, I mean, first of all, what was coverage like there?
Gosh, in California, I had everything I needed. I always feel like there's loopholes in with insurances, but I did have some trouble switching to different insurances, but I always had what I needed. Yes, so things got a little wacky when I when I came out to Texas. Even though the coverage here, from what I hear, it kind of depends on if you have a private or a public insurance, and technically, I should have formula and food covered here, but it's been a little trickier than that, getting it all set up. So
just that fact that the idea of moving from one state to another, did that make you feel anxious at all when you were kind of getting ready for your move and going through your move?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually a big reason why. Well, first, why I wanted to stay in California to go to college. It was just something I didn't want to deal with. I mean, just in a state where formula and food was covered, I mean, I've had multiple battles throughout my life trying to get everything I need. So moving definitely was not on my agenda, I guess. But God had different plans for us. I think that it was a huge stressor for me. Now I'm kind of looking back and I'm like, okay, I still don't have it all resolved, but I've been taken care of up to this point. And I mean, I know it's going to be okay, but I can totally see how it would be definitely something that would persuade me to not want to move out of state in the future. But I also, on the other hand, am like, well, I mean, I'm not going to let PKU not let me enjoy life. And right now, the adventure we're on is living outside Austin. And so, we have to do whatever it means or whatever we need to do to get it all set on the PKU side of life. So, yeah.
Well, and then the other thing, too, is that you are also a new mom. Is that right?
I am. Yes. So, I have. Yeah.
So tell me about that. we talk to people, a lot of people are always concerned about maternal PKU. Just kind of tell me about what it was like for you trying to make sure that, your levels were in good, at a good place while you were pregnant.
Yeah, so PKU pregnancy was interesting. Was interesting. Um, it was difficult getting so basically you have to have, well, most clinics suggest that you have typically lower Phe levels than within the safe range. Like my clinic suggested being around a 3, with the safe range being between 2 and 6. So that was difficult at the beginning, especially because I was used to being on the higher end of that scale. So getting my levels down meant cutting out Phe from my diet even more. So getting my levels down took some work. It definitely was tricky. It took me probably about 6 months to like really feel like I had the hang of it. And my clinic suggested for me to have like 3 months of like solid good Phe levels before I tried to get pregnant. And I got so it took me about 6 months, and then I got pregnant. And it was, I mean, I cried so much, but mostly just because it just reminds you like how out of control sometimes your Phe levels can be. I mean, getting sick or not eating enough calories, that can make your Phe levels go up. And as soon as I got pregnant, it got a lot easier because it's like, okay, there's a reason for this, like it didn't feel so, I don't know, it didn't feel so difficult because there was like a tangible reason. But it definitely was a struggle. I would definitely say that was probably up until that part, like the hardest time I had staying on diet.
People's understanding of obviously maternal PKU has really evolved since I was a kid, for example, because, you hear things back then of, well, we don't really know if it's good for a woman with PKU to have children. Yeah. And, were you ever concerned? I mean, I have to ask, were you ever concerned about that whole thing of, I did a story last year on, some women who had some problems controlling their levels during pregnancy, and it's just heartbreaking what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, was that something that really, I guess, in your sense, helped motivate you to be on your diet?
It definitely motivated me, but I have to say I very much considered not having my own children because I had just been told so many times by so many different doctors. I feel like the scary side, which is really good because in one way, because I was fully knowledgeable that like my levels had to be in range. But also I was so terrified of pregnancy. I really didn't know if I wanted to have my own kids. To me, it almost felt like I'd been educated my whole life that like a healthy PKU pregnancy can't exist, but it can. It just you just have to go about it the right way. But yeah, definitely it was terrifying. And as soon as I got pregnant, I mean, I had awful morning sickness through a big part of the pregnancy. When they say the first trimester, that was not the case for me. It went on for months and months after that. And that was so hard because, you're like, you have to be so controlled. You're weighing out everything you eat, measuring everything you eat, and then you go throw it up. Like, you don't know how much phenylalanine just left your body. You have no idea. Keeping down formula was hard. So it is scary during that time, especially because I was just like, man, I hope, the baby's okay. And it's terrifying. I have always felt like if it has to do with myself, even though it probably shouldn't be this way, if it has to do with myself, then like, okay, like I'll take care of it. But like, if it has to do with a baby, like the stakes just got so much higher. So, yeah, it's a scary time, but
yeah. And I should also say this is a huge reason why I'm, such a big supporter of the Medical Nutrition Equity Act.
Yes,
I'd only thought about, honestly, until I worked on this video project that I mentioned till last year, I had only thought of Medical Nutrition Equity Act as just as it related to me, people I know and everything. The way that it relates to maternal PKU, I just didn't even think about. And part of the story that we did was interviewing a lady who, she wanted to be on diet. She wanted to have everything. She wanted to do it the right way, but she lived in a state where she didn't have access to her formula. She didn't have access to any low protein foods. And so keeping her levels in check, it was it was impossible for her.
Yeah.
And as a result, her child ended up having some problems. And it's just heartbreaking because you're just like, it's just heartbreaking. But in your case, though, obviously everything turned out, well for you. What would you say to, other women or younger girls, people who are going to be thinking in the future, and they're asking that question, should I not have kids? Why would you encourage them at least to consider that it is at least possible for them?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I just say exactly that it is possible to have a healthy PKU pregnancy. And I just think, I think that it showed me how strong I am and how, what I was capable of. I tell a lot of people now that are going through the same thing, like, what a lucky kid you will have. Like, you're a mom that loves your baby so much before you even are thinking about trying to make them, that you are getting your whole health completely in check so that they can be as healthy as possible. And that's like just I think such a beautiful thing. Like, what a lucky kid. But I definitely, I think it's difficult. I don't think that it's something that, we play down. Like, I don't think it ever should be played down, like how dangerous it can be. But I think it's definitely possible, definitely doable, and something that when it's that time, all I have to say is that I had to have people around me talking to me constantly, having the phone number of other women who have done it and have done it successfully and have beautiful, children. That just was like huge for me. I went through pregnancy with another woman with PKU who was also having her first baby. And then a handful of other women too that have already had children. And I think that there's no one else that understands the struggle besides someone else who's done it. And sometimes it's like just exactly what you need to have someone else who could not keep formula down and was just so flipped out just to kind of calm you down. So yeah, that's absolutely what I'd suggest. There's like awesome Facebook groups. There's a PKU maternal. Yeah, I think it's called that. Maternal PKU Facebook group, something like that. But look it up, and it was so huge for me. And then also just seeing people who have done it and just see their beautiful babies, and it's like, okay, like it just feels more tangible and feels like you can do it when it is time. And
last question I have for you is, what would you say to anyone that's either younger than us or just somebody who's struggling right now and is just thinking, I just want to give up. I'm done with this. I hate PKU. I don't want to do this anymore. What would you say to them to help try to keep them, just to try to take it, keep going at it one day at a time?
Yeah, I think, I just think that your brain is so worth it. It's so worth it. I've been in that spot before too. And I always think of the people in my life. And I just think of like, what kind of wife would I be? What kind of teacher? What kind of mom am I going to be if I don't keep going, even though this is difficult right now? So I would just say, think of, the other people in your life. Think of yourself and just think of like the best version of you. And even though it feels very, very difficult, it is so worth it to have your brain working and functioning the way that, it's meant to. And I think that as far as food goes, I'm like the biggest fan of food in the world. And I just think that the thing that's made me successful on the PKU diet has been always finding new and fun ways to eat. And if you have boring meals, it's not going to work because you're going to compare it to all the high protein stuff that you could be eating. So I just say get some exciting new meals in there. And if it's a struggle to get food and formula, then go to the grocery store. There's so much now with gluten-free options and vegan options. There's a lot of low protein things you can find at the grocery store that can just kind of help you on your way too.
Well, Laura, thank you very, very much for joining me on the podcast today.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to contact me, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at PKU Life Podcast. Links are in the show notes, along with links for Laura's channel, Thriving with PKU. I'll be back soon with another episode. See you then.